As far as birthday presents go, this one will definitely be top 3, right?
On the front page of the Times this morning, Andy Burnham is giving Ukraine classified blueprints for long-range missiles. He's announced the government's given the green light for a defence company, MBDA, to share the information on UK components that go into French Scalp missiles. The Prime Minister's in Ukraine, where he'll chair a meeting of the leaders of what is called the Coalition of the Willing, more than 30 countries that support Ukraine. Yuriy Sak's a former advisor to the Ukrainian Minister of Defence. Good morning, Yuriy.
Good morning.
Thanks,
Good morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. So let's start with news that these Scalp long-range missile, the blueprints for these will be shared with Ukraine. What does this change?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that today we are marking 35th anniversary of Ukraine's independence. And as far as birthday presents go, this one will definitely be top 3, right? So for us to get the blueprints is really important because, we have understood for some time now that for this war to end, there's only one workable and efficient strategy, is to make it impossible for Russia to fight it. For us to make it impossible for Russia to fight it, we need capacity to destroy Russian war machinery inside Russia. So before they launch their attacks, we need to be able to attack their launchers, right? So don't try to shoot down the arrows, kill the archer. That's our strategy for now. So disrupt their logistics, destroy their oil refineries, make sure that the economic cost of aggression grows. So from that perspective, receiving these blueprints perhaps will help us achieve our strategic objective faster.
Make it impossible for Russia to fight is a very neat way of putting it. I wonder if the Coalition of the Willing meeting will advance that cause. What's your expectation there?
Well, I think by now everybody understands that, this war, which we, among ourselves, we call the freedom war, because we're not fighting just for Ukrainian territory. We're fighting for, democratic values of the free world. So I think among the Coalition of the Willing, there is a good understanding that it's always been the fight of David versus Goliath. And from that perspective, we need every help that we can get, and this can be made possible. So, an asymmetric methods, and by asymmetric, I mean, of course, we will never be able to match Russia in terms of the manpower. We will be never able to match Russia in terms of their reluctance to, protect and preserve human life. They can throw their soldiers by the thousands into the battlefield and see them killed and have no worry about it. So that's not our strategy. Our strategy is asymmetric. So fewer weapons, but used in a smart way, will help us achieve our objectives.
Yeah. In terms of the breadth of support from the more than 30 countries, I suppose the Scalp missile represents that to some extent, doesn't it? Because France agreed to hand over the blueprints for these missiles back in July, and today the Prime Minister is announcing that you'll get the blueprints for the British components of these as well. And this is about establishing local assembly lines for the missile, which shares the British and French technology. How quickly can those local assembly lines be up and running?
We have been able, during the last 4 years of this large-scale invasion, we have been able to leapfrog in terms of developing our defense industry, and many joint ventures with the weapons companies of the West are being launched now and already are functioning. And I'd like to say that, Scalp missiles are the same as Storm Shadow missiles, which we have been getting from the UK, and we are very thankful for that for some time now. So our army knows very well how to use them best. So being able to produce them locally, of course, will only, first of all, strengthen our army, but second of all, will help Ukraine integrate even further into European defense industry space, and that will make us all safer. What I'd like also to say in this context is that we hope that someday, the same way as MBDA is giving the blueprints for these missiles, we hope that Lockheed Martin will be generous enough to give Ukraine blueprints for the Patriot interceptor missiles, because this is the major threat for now, and this is the kind of last remaining option for Russia to terrorize Ukrainian cities with ballistic missiles. We are experiencing shortage of ballistic missile interceptors, so let's hope that Lockheed Martin in the US follows suit of MBDA and will, give Ukraine another present for the Independence Day.
And would that depend on a concession from President Trump?
Well, President Trump seems to have first agreed that, it's a good idea, because it is a good idea, right? At the moment, globally, there are only 700 Patriot missiles produced per year. Now, that's not enough for a globe which is set on fire. There's a war here in Ukraine, aggressive war of Russia against Ukraine. There's war in the Middle East. There's risk of war in Taiwan and in other places. So 700 globally is not nowhere near enough. So we need more countries to be able to produce these missiles, and that means that Donald Trump needs to assume leadership and convince companies like Lockheed Martin to actually share the IP for these technologies, and we'll be all safer.
President Zelensky was Prime Minister Burnham's first international guest to visit in late July. It has taken about 5 weeks for Prime Minister Andy Burnham to visit Ukraine. Do you think that was an undue delay? What do you make of the timing of his visit?
Well, we never doubted the level of support of the UK for Ukraine, and I'm sure probably Andy Burnham just had, some housekeeping that he had to do after elections. But UK's support never stopped in that period, and we are grateful for that. And the United Kingdom is one of the few countries in whose support we never doubt, even in the most difficult of times.
Can I ask as well, Yuri, about the former Defence Minister Fedorov, who has called in the last few days for an election to be held during wartime, somewhat undermining President Zelensky's leadership. This was after he left Zelensky's administration. And President Zelensky, he says, should be asked questions about corruption in his government. He is he was a popular minister. He was sacked. He pioneered drone warfare. Apparently he fell out with the head of Ukraine's armed forces. I'm just interested in your analysis of the relationship between former Defence Minister Fedorov and President Zelensky, and indeed his call for an election to be held.
My analysis is very simple. What has happened with respect to the former Minister of Defence, Mr. Fedorov, who has done great things to strengthen our country, to improve our defence industry, and to make our army stronger. So overall, I think it's a demonstration of the simple fact that Ukraine is a democratic country, a country where even a Minister of Defence during a time of war can have a separate opinion, which is not the same as the president's opinion. We have seen protesters in the street, with air raid sirens blaring out, and there's risk of missile attacks, but people still feel that, they have to protect democracy and they have to protect their freedom of expression. It was a difficult situation because, the country is at war. We need, Minister of Defense to be there in his position and make these decisions. Mr. Fedorov had different views on certain aspects of how the army should be developed further on. But our president is the supreme commander-in-chief, and for as long as it stays that way, according to Constitution, he's got the final say. And I'd like to say that Mr. Fedorov's calls for early elections, most of Ukrainians understand very well that it's just not possible to hold elections that will be recognized as democratic, because millions of Ukrainians are currently living in other countries as refugees and displaced people. There are hundreds of thousands who are fighting the war, and they won't be able to vote because they're at war. So for us to have a meaningful elections, and everybody is in agreement that we need elections. President Zelensky knows that we need elections because we're a democracy. It's just when. So we need a ceasefire at least for people to be able to express their vote in such a way that nobody will question the legitimacy of such elections after they happen.
Yuri, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. It's good to have you on and enjoy, I suppose, the celebrations of Independence Day, even in the context. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yuriy Sak is a former advisor to the Ukrainian Minister of Defence.